So welcome to our seed keeping workshop. I'm Laura Casaragola. I'm joined today by Kristen Fields and Chantel Kemp. We're all members of the GrowNYC School Gardens team. Let's get started with the workshop. So at GrowNYC, we protect the environment, create green spaces, help people stay healthy, and give them opportunity to make a positive impact. In today's workshop, you can use the chat just to chat with us. If you have any questions though, please put them in the Q&A function, which is in your toolbar, because that'll make it easier for us to sort through questions and start answering them at the end of the workshop. So put questions in the Q&A. We are recording the workshop today, and we'll send you a follow-up email tomorrow that will have the recording of this workshop, as well as additional follow-up resources and guides for seed saving. You can find more virtual workshops and a lot more resources on our distance learning site, which is GrowNYC, distancelearning.org. That's where we'll be posting today's workshop as well. So if you want to share it out with other people you think are interested, please do so. And I'm going to pass it over to Chantel.
Awesome. Thanks, Laura. So in the workshop today, we'll be talking about seed keeping. I'll be sharing some stories about seeds that I'm really passionate about. I'll also talk to you guys about why you should seed keep, flowering and pollination, a seed guide, and some seed safety. And then I'll show you some of the seeds that I was keeping this season. Next slide. So the first thing before we plant anything or try to save anything is to source responsibly. So making sure that we are sourcing from local and organic stewards if possible, sourcing from seed libraries, sourcing from organic seed companies if you can, and then also sourcing from BIPOC and indigenous stewards and farmers, because we do have a responsibility as land stewards to grow food in a way that doesn't negatively impact the earth or other people. So if you can offset where you're sourcing your seeds from, even in tiny increments, it can actually have a large and long-term effect on your space. So you don't have to do all of these things, but instead of buying seeds from some random place, maybe being more intentional about where you're actually getting your seeds from. Next slide. So what is seed keeping? So seed saving and seed keeping are actually two sides of the same coin. The term keeping was coined by Owen Taylor and Chris Bolden Newsom of True Love Seeds, who are encouraging farmers to keep the stories of stewards who curated seeds along with the plant itself. So I say keeping instead of saving, just to honor the work of farmers, of their sacrifices, and then also honoring the plants that are with us. And also bringing in the storytelling portion of it, keeping stories surrounding seeds, whether it be from ancestors or from community members, and alive and a part of the growing space in general. And it also puts a lot of significance on plants, farmers, and land usage when it comes to culture. Yes, next slide. So I did actually want to share a story of some seed keepers. I learned a lot about West African women, specifically Maroon women, who were rice farmers before they were enslaved. And some of the things that they would do is that they would braid rice seeds into their hair. And so as you see in one of the pictures, we have seeds that are basically braided into a cornrow, which actually brings up a very valuable point about why braiding hair and braids are actually really significant in African culture. It's not just about the braids themselves, but also about what they carry and the weight of that. And so because of these maroon farmers, that's actually the reason why we have such a robust cultivation of rice in the Americas, Brazil, Jamaica, Haiti, because a lot of these women, not only were they traveling with seeds, but they were also harvesting seeds on the thrashings on the ships. They were picking them up as they go, and then also trading seeds with other farmers that they may have known at the time. Yes. And I also wanted to share this picture that shows like the different designs that African women would weave into their hair. It was not only just for aesthetics, it actually was used as maps. So these different designs would serve as maps for people to be able to escape captivity. And so that's the reason why the designs are so intricate. If we think about how the rows and everything are set up, especially in the US, it's so confusing, right? And so they had to be very creative about how they were creating these maps. But then also a lot of the braiding styles also played into heritage, specifically where women were from, what status they had in their old tribes, and to basically prove a form of hierarchy. So it's like if I have like a very high top that's very like royal versus something that's a little bit lower, I might have been like in a lower class in the tribe. So just wanted to share that story about seeds, and hopefully you will also look into the heritage around a lot of seeds that you're growing, and then also like your family, your ancestry, and what seeds they were harvesting and keeping.
So in addition to the really amazing stories that can be intertwined with seed keeping, there are a lot of other really great reasons to start seed keeping. You can avoid genetically modified varieties, which often require chemicals like herbicides and pesticides in order to grow. So you can kind of avoid using those chemicals if you are keeping your own seeds every year with heirloom varieties. It's also a way to take back some control from unethical corporations who have seed monopolies, and just remembering and keeping the knowledge alive of how to keep this going so that it can stay alive within our communities. It's a great way to retain biodiversity and protect native and ancestral seeds from extinction, as well as cultivate ones that are not native to where you live now, but might be from another country that is significant for you. And lastly, it is also a great way to save money so you don't have to purchase your seeds every year. And you'll really deepen your knowledge, and anyone who's doing it with you, if you have students doing it too, it's a great and amazing learning experience for them. So as you're starting off with seed keeping, a few of the main tenets is that you'll want to look for healthy, vigorous plants with the ideal characteristics of that variety. So you want to save the very best for the future. And you can decide like which tomato or which eggplant is the one that's your favorite, that like tastes the best to you or looks the best to you or has the traits that you want to keep going. Maybe it has an interesting variegation in the leaves or in the skin of the fruit. Maybe you know that this plant always produces the tastiest sun golds, so you want to take those ones. So you want to keep an eye and keep track of which ones that you really like and are most meaningful to you. If you're just a beginner getting started, we recommend doing open pollinated varieties, which we'll go into later, but basically it's the least complicated way to seed save. And so some of those easier species to start are peas, lettuce, beans, and tomatoes. And then the other main thing to keep in mind is how you're going to store your seeds. So you do want to find a cool, dry, and dark place, because the main goal is just to keep moisture and humidity away from the seeds. So they do need to be cool, dry, and dark, because we don't want it to get moldy or start growing fungus. And we also don't want it to start germinating before we're ready to actually plant them. And something else to keep in mind with your seeds is they all have a different shelf life. And that's something you can kind of research into as you're saving seeds. Some seeds are fine for only a year, some can last 5 years. So there's a lot of different ways to store your seeds as well, which we'll get into a little more. So with whatever plants that you want to seed save, you're going to want to figure out when and how do the plants flower, because that's basically where we're going to be getting the seeds, is from the flower, from the fruit that comes out of the flower, or the seed pod that comes out of that. So the flowering is pretty important in finding out which type of flowering plant it is. So annuals are a great place to start because they're going to grow, flower, set seed, and die off all within a single growing season. And some examples of that are legumes, lettuce, peppers, okra, and maize. There are a lot more, but those are just a few examples. Another class of flowering plants are biennials, and they require a cold period in order to flower. So you might have to wait an extra season and wait for them to actually flower, because they won't do it just, if you plant them in the spring, they're not going to flower by the fall. They need another cold period. So that's usually a 2-year process. And so carrots, onions, leeks, beets, and some brassicas are examples of biennial flowering plants. And then there are also perennial flowering plants, which survive and flower for many years on their own. They don't need any extra help. They just kind of keep doing it year after year. And that some examples of that are asparagus, raspberries, and apple trees. So once you know how your plants are going to flower and you know what to expect and when to expect them to flower, you'll also want to learn about their pollination style and how they're going to reproduce. So some plants reproduce together within their crop type. So different broccoli plants need to be planted together and they'll pollinate each other. Same with Brussels sprouts, cabbage, and cauliflower, and some other things. Self-pollinating plants, those are the ones we actually recommend starting with, or those are the easiest ones to do. So each plant will pollinate its own flowers, and so you don't have to plant it in any special location or plant it with other types of crops, because they'll just pollinate themselves. And so those are things like legumes, lettuce, and tomatoes. A third class are cross-pollinators, and those are plants that require different types of plants all around them. So an example of that would be corn, collards, okra, and squash. So they need a lot of other varieties around them. And something interesting about this is I had someone recently ask me, can I grow tomatoes indoors? And I was like, oh, I never really thought of that, because people don't generally try to grow tomatoes indoors, but this was during the quarantine. And since they're a self-pollinating plant, it might be possible, but you'd still have to, there's no wind indoors or anything like that. So we'll get into a little more. I'll hand it over to Chantel to talk about hand pollination, which might work for tomatoes.
Yes, I mean, I could see someone trying to hand pollinate some tomatoes, and I'd love a video if you actually try to do it. So hand pollination is actually a lot simpler, I think, than it is prescribed to be. And so most farmers, they use hand pollination if they want to keep a specific crop the same way, right? They don't want it to turn blue or, get cross-contaminated with another variety that they have. Like, say, for instance, if you had 2 different corns, you had a white corn and you had a blue corn, you kind of want your white corn to stay white, right? And so hand pollination in this area actually comes very handy. So what is needed for hand pollination is unisex flowers. So that is a male flower and a female flower. And you can tell the difference because the female flower has the fruit. So that's where the fruit is going to come from, and the male flower doesn't. So all you would essentially need in order to hand pollinate some crops is a paintbrush or a Q-tip, and you would identify which flower is the male flower and brush some pollen from the inside of the flower. And then you would identify which flower is the female flower, and you would open it up, and then you would basically spread the pollen inside of the female flower and close up the female flower. So some people, they use like a little tie or a scrunchie, or they just scrunch it up because the petals itself are so delicate that they don't want to open it too much. But even if you rip a petal or something, the plant will be fine. So you don't have to worry about kind of messing up the plant trying to hand pollinate. The next thing I wanted to bring up is population size. And so population size plays into once you have a bigger space and you're growing at production. So certain plants require several individuals in close proximity in order to reproduce, like we said in other slides, right? So, sometimes you need people around you in order to produce great work. So the plants kind of work in the same way. But if you have too many, that actually can hurt the genetic diversity of the plant. So as we see here in this picture, we have a piece of corn at 27,000. That was corn on the cob. That was on the grill, doing beautiful. But then as we see, once we raise up the population size, the plant starts to negate some of that genetic material in order to continue producing at the same rate. So this is something also that can play into, crop rotation. If you're not crop rotating and you have a high population size, then you're going to lose the genetic diversity of specific plants. So this is a lot like more advanced, like once you get to that stage. But population size can also help when it comes to just having something grow to fruit that you really enjoy. So in the next slide, there is
just a quick note about corn. I know a lot of our city gardens, corn is definitely a tricky one to grow, and at home with home gardens as well. And so you want less than 27,000 plants, but you do need a certain number of plants in order for it to become pollinated properly and grow the fruit. So yes, I'll move us on to the next slide so we can see the table that will hopefully be very helpful to a lot of people.
Yes. So like what Laura was saying was like maybe some folks had tried to grow corn before, but they only grew like 2 corn or like 3 different corns, and the plant itself might need more individuals around it in order to be able to produce at the level that it's supposed to. So in this chart, this is also a resource that will be available for you guys to look at later if you want to kind of scour this chart to kind of see if you had the right population size for certain plants that you were growing that maybe didn't do so well. And so we see it has the crop, it has the species, the family, the life cycle of the plant, the primary pollination method, isolation distance. This is if you want to hand pollinate and you want to keep it away from other open varieties. And then this is the end of the chart. This is where population size comes into play. It lets you know how many seeds you would need, how many number of plants that you would need, and then what's going to keep it at the same genetic sphere that it's in. So we see here for the amaranth, you would need to have at least 50 or more of the plants in order for it to stay the same in the same genetic material that it has been. But then if you look down at the cucumber, you only need 25 plus. So you can kind of use this chart if you are, saving seeds that might.
Chantel, your audio just went out. We can't hear you. But you're not muted, so I'm not sure what happened.
No.
Oh wait, I think I can hear you.
Oh no.
yes, you're back. You're back.
You're okay.
Okay.
And also, Chantel, let me just jump in for a sec. So we're getting like, yes, we are going to email these slides and the whole presentation tomorrow. So you'll have it tomorrow in your inboxes.
And this is a chart that we got from Seed Savers Exchange. So that's just available on the internet. So we'll have the link so that you can see all the rest of the plants. Because as you can see, this is just one page of many.
Yeah, so true. Maura, how about you lead us through seed safety?
Yes, we got to keep the seeds safe. And I saw some of those questions were popping up in the Q&A as well, which are really good questions. So as I started to mention earlier on, you do want to keep your seeds away from moisture, humidity, condensation, any of the wet stuff. So you want to keep them in paper bags, paper envelopes, glass jars. You don't want to keep them in plastic bags because those can harbor humidity. You want to keep them in a dark, dry, and cool space. So for our example, for our program, we keep them in a storage closet that is in our office, so it never gets too hot. It's dark most of the time. They're in paper envelopes. You can keep seeds in the fridge or the freezer, which I saw some people are asking about in the Q&A. You can keep them up to 5 years. When you're ready to take them out of the fridge or the freezer, it's recommended to allow it to reach room temperature before you open the packet. And again, that's because if you open it while it's still cooling, while it's still cold, it'll create condensation on the seeds. And so you want to prevent against that. And then you want to label it really well. I know I have sometimes the urge to be like, I'll remember what that is. And I never do. So you always got to label things with as much info as you can, because it'll definitely help future you down the line. So put the name, put the species, the variety, the year that you're saving it from. It helps to put some other information like the planting zone, the climate, growing zone, and the plant family, because that will help you with your crop planning calendars later on when you're ready to plant. And another note on seed storage is it's good to research how long your seed variety can keep for, because there's certain things I'm trying to remember that can keep for 5 years just in a cool, dark place. They don't even need to be in a freezer. But there's other types of seeds that really only have a room temperature shelf life of 1 season, 1 year. So just keep track of how long your seeds are viable for and how long their shelf life is.
Awesome. Right. And so now we get into what I was doing all season. So I was keeping some radishes. So as you can see there, those are the radish pods, and the actual radish flowers are so beautiful, purple and white. And it was a lot of pollinators in that space just for me letting it to go to seed. So you kind of just let it grow out. The pollinators are going to pollinate the flowers, and then you'll get these pods. And then you want to harvest the pods once they turn brown. You can bring them into a warm location, spread them out for a day, spread them out to dry for about a week or so. I just put mine in a paper bag. Like I just cut it off and put it in a paper bag, and it was good to go. So if you don't have the space to kind of lay everything out and have like this really advanced system, just throw it in a bag, you know. And then once the seeds kind of rattle in the pod, if you could kind of hear it, like I'm shaking it and I could hear a little bit of it, then you can like put them in a sack or a pillowcase and crack them open, or you can just crack them open because they're dry and brittle and they'll open pretty easily. You gotta clean the seeds once you're done. But this is, let me show you. This is like 2 of the radish seeds. I don't know if you could see them. They're so tiny. It's funny because they're in this huge pod, but the seed itself is like really, really tiny. So like this is how the seed kind of came out the pod. So I didn't really have to clean it off at all. And then I'll store it in a paper bag, and then kind of call it a day and plant those radishes again next spring. Next slide. Right, so this is kind of my process. I just kind of cut off the individual branches. When I had looked up online, it said to take out the whole plant and then turn it upside down and put it in a bag. But like I said, I didn't have the space or the patience to do that. And so I just ended up cutting off the branches and harvesting the pods that were already browning and putting them in a paper bag.
And so Chantel, these radishes, they're an annual flowering plant, right? So you just planted them in the spring and they're ready now for that. Yeah. And they're also open pollinated?
Yes.
Okay, so those Those are like the best ones.
The best ones. It was I wanted to start easy, right? Because
The simple ones, yeah.
exactly. But then I also wanted to challenge myself a little bit, so I did keep some carrots this season. Obviously, you know they're biennial, so I didn't get any carrot seeds to show you guys. But you just basically let the carrot flower bloom, and that's kind of how it looks when it's first starting out. It looks like a web, and it's really cool. But it does take up a lot of space. So what I did was I ended up taking some string and kind of tying the branches together because they get a little bit long, and it was just like hanging over the side of the bed, kind of doing its own thing out of the way. You harvest when the blooms turn brown, and so that will be happening in the cold season. So I have to wait for the cold period to come for my flowers to die, essentially. And in the next slide, it has the pictures of the before and after. So that's my carrot flower. My boo. She's getting pollinated right now. And then on the other side, that's actually what the flower will look like in the cold season. And then, you know, once it gets that dry, you can just basically cut off the heads, put them in a paper bag, shake them, thrash them. They'll be basically ready to go. So you don't have to do anything special other than cutting off the bulbs and getting rid of the rest of the plant if you're not going to use it. Next slide. And then cilantro, because I'm growing right now in Castle Hill in the Bronx, and we have a very robust Hispanic community that was very much upset that I did not grow enough cilantro this season. And so keeping these cilantro seeds are actually going to save me for next season when they come looking for it. And maybe I could get some sofrito this time. So you're basically just going to let your cilantro flower and bloom once it starts going to seed. And then you harvest the seeds and the stalk when it turns brown. And I actually do have some cilantro seeds here. These are my little branches, and right here you see the little seed pods. And so they're really tiny, but they don't actually require a lot of maintenance. I kind of did the same thing that I did with the radishes, which is I cut off a bunch of them, put them in the paper bag, and now they're ready to go. Also, if they are all kind of drying and dying at the same time, what some farmers do is they actually like just pull up the whole plant, and then they'll like whack the plant against like a bucket or something to kind of like shake the seeds loose. But the seeds aren't really hard to get off. They kind of just, they pluck off really easily if you let them dry. So if you don't have a bucket, you have some mobility issues where you can't be whacking something, just let it dry in a bag, and then you could kind of pick them off and put them in their own storage containers later. And the next slide, we have some pictures of what the cilantro look. Yes, George, the dry seeds of cilantro is actually called coriander. Yes, and coriander is actually used to make a lot of curries and other seasoning mixes. We also do have a robust Indian community as well who was schooling me on coriander and cilantro. So this is kind of what the plant looks like when the seeds are kind of popping up. It's still really green, so this is not the time to harvest them. But then on the side, you see I have them kind of laid out. I just cut them at the root and put them in a bucket. I put them on this like little lid or whatever as I was kind of popping off seeds. And then also for this one, because we have a shed in the garden, it's pretty dark most of the time. So I kind of just put it in the corner and it did its own thing. So that's also something that you can also do depending on how much space you have. And a cool game. Laura, can you lead us through this?
Yeah, we have a trivia question. So if you want to take a guess, put it in the chat. What crop is this? It's flowering. We don't often see the flowers. We're getting a lot of guesses of the same thing. Give everyone a minute.
Okay.
Yes, I can't trick you guys. Is rosemary. Good
Yeah.
job.
We had rosemary or juniper. 2 guesses in there, but it's
Nice.
rosemary. Well done.
And we have another one.
Okay. All right, take a guess. What crop is this?
All right, a little more divided this time. Onions, leeks, scallion, garlic.
Everyone's got the right idea because those are all alliums.
Yep. Nice. So it actually is onion, and I'm so excited that a lot of you guys knew. Like you just in the garden. That's what's up.
Yeah, it's really interesting to look up what all the different crops, what their flowers look like, because I think a lot of gardeners are, we're told or we tell people like, oh, you want to cut stuff off before it flowers, or once it goes to flower, that's the end.
Yeah.
That's the end of the season, it's the end of the plant. Even with a lot of herbs like basil, we recommend pinching off the flowers and stuff. But eventually, the plants are going to flower, and I think it's really nice to continue gardening. Like the roll doesn't stop there, so there's a lot more you can still do with these. And in addition to, being able now to collect seeds and save seeds from them, or keep the seeds, flowering plants are also great for pollinators. So that's another reason I also like to encourage people, like towards the very end of the summer, like just let your basil go or your mint and let it flower and be wild and make seeds and feed the pollinators.
Yeah, especially like if you're in an area where you've been trying to bring pollinators. So we basically had started the garden in December of 2020, and there was just grass there. So the pollinators were not recognizing that as a space that they needed to be in. So we definitely had to let a lot of things flower and have a lot of flowers, just to be able to have like 2 or 3 butterflies come by the space. So I'm expecting to have more pollinators next season.
Yeah, we'll have to start a pollinator bed.
Yeah.
Made of plants.
And these are some seed exchanges that I kind of looked at. So most public libraries, they actually do have a seed library, and you just basically can go there and take seeds. And the only stipulation is that next season you will bring seeds back, either those same seeds that you took or a different variety of something else, just to make sure that the library always has enough for everyone else. There are also seed swaps and plant swaps. There's also Reclaim Seed NYC. They have the most up-to-date stuff on their Instagram. So if you want to look them up on Instagram about when they're going to be doing seed exchanges or seed swaps, feel free to do so. And then I just put the Nylock seed exchange. They're not giving out any seeds, but they have these really great videos on how to seed save. And if you're just starting out, I would say start out with those resource videos, because it's going to give you a lot of information, and they might give you some really cool tricks and tips for saving seeds easier. And some resources about Africa, blah, blah, and questions.
All right, we have a whole bunch of questions. Just a reminder to folks, please put them in the Q&A, because that's where I'm going to read from. So first question is, can we recommend any particularly responsible seed sources for people?
I would definitely say the seed libraries, saving your own seeds, or even if you know other farmers who are saving seeds, offering a barter. Like if you know that they're going to save tomatoes, you save peppers, and now you both don't have to save tomatoes and peppers because you're going to do an exchange. So that's something that you could easily do. I wouldn't necessarily recommend. I know people are using specific companies like True Love Seed and Johnny's. So feel free to. So
Someone that's usually local, maybe sourcing some like native or heirloom varieties. Farmers and farmers markets is a good place usually too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think we answered this. Can seeds be kept in the fridge? Is that
Yes.
a cool dark place? Yes. Okay. All right. Here's one for you all. How few corn plants could somebody get away with planting in a New York City garden and still have a yield of corn?
So I don't know the answer to that question, I'll be honest. But there's also a difference between how many corn plants you need to plant in order to have a good crop and how many corn plants do you need in order to preserve genetic material for seed saving specifically.
Yeah.
So the chart that we had is more about this one. This is more about seed saving and your genetic preservation. So that's what these numbers are mainly for. If you're looking just to grow corn and get a good crop, my guess is you wouldn't need as many as this chart says. That's like a kind of different question. But if you're curious about the corn thing, I don't know if Chantel, if you know off the top of your head. I don't.
No, I don't know off the top of my head, but I was thinking when we were talking about this, I was telling Laura, like, oh, we should put a little thing here for the corn because I know some.
And then we forgot. Yeah. But it'll be on this Seed Savers exchange if you're looking to seed save from corn. They'll have that information. Otherwise, you can also email us and we'll research it for you.
Yeah.
All right, next one up is, so you leave the carrot in the bed, let it flower, and then you let it go to seed.
Yes.
Yeah, there we go. And then you collect your seeds and you carry on for next year. All
yes.
Right.
It's so simple.
Chantel, it sounds like some folks might want to visit you in Castle Hill. They're asking, where is the garden and can people visit?
Of course. So we're in Castle Hill houses of the Bronx, in the South Bronx. And the garden is open like to the public and like other community members. So if folks wanted to email us about coming out, we could definitely do that. And I set it up with community members and some of the garden members. We'd be really happy to have you.
The Castle Hill Garden also has a really fun Instagram. So you can they post about their events and volunteer days on their Castle Hill Garden.
Yes, thank you, Laura. Yeah, you can follow us on Instagram at Castle Hill Garden.
That in the chat.
To all the presenters, do you all have a garden or access to a garden? This question. Okay, yeah. So Chantel, you're growing in Castle Hill.
Yeah.
Laura?
Oh, okay. Yeah, so for my role, I work with school gardens. So I don't have like one specific garden that I'm working in all the time. So kind of not, but we also, a lot of us end up helping out at the teaching garden on Governor's Island, which is a really cool space that's open to the public on the weekends and anyone can visit the garden. They're open 12 to 4 whenever, on the weekends, Saturday and Sunday. So that's also a cool place. And a lot of things are flowering there right now because it's end of the summer. So it's kind of fun. Some of the plants have been there and they're just huge flowers. So it is cool.
How do you plant beans from dried beans? Do you have to hydrate them before planting or just plant it in the dirt and water it?
For beans, they need to be dried. So you just take, even if you have like beans, bagged dried beans in your pantry, you can just take those and plant them. And you do want to water it pretty well to make sure it wakes up and germinates. If you just wanted to test the germination to see if it's possible for it to germinate, because personally, I might have some beans in there that are a couple years old. So you might want to test the germination beforehand, and you can do that by keeping it in a wet paper towel in a Tupperware for like a week or so, and just making sure that they actually can germinate and sprout. But when you're ready to actually plant, if you want to plant a crop of beans, it should be dry when you put it in the ground.
Yeah. And then also one of the things is you can kind of use population size in this experiment. And instead of just germinating one bean seed, actually germinate like 5 and see how many out of the 5 actually germinated. And that's how you know how viable the actual seed is.
How about saving seeds from the fruits and vegetables we buy and eat? So
Oh,
this
that's
is
such a great question.
a good question. It's a little more
Because,
complicated. Yeah.
well, the great thing is we've done workshops on how to grow a garden from, we call it Grow Garden from Food Scraps.
Mhm.
And so that in that workshop, we go a bit more in depth into growing things like uh, kind of like fun experiment things like lemons or avocado pits. That's where we talk about dried beans and sprouting them. We talk about trying to remember what else, regrowing from your, like if you want to propagate herb cuttings and start growing those. So we have a workshop on that. I'm screen sharing right now, so I can't pull up the link, but
And we can
um,
put it in the follow-up
yeah, we can put
email
it in the
too.
follow-up.
So we'll send you that one tomorrow. So, um, do you all ever save flower seeds?
Oh, yes. Actually, I think it is a great idea to save flower seeds, especially from bulbs that you might have planted in the spring, or flowers that particularly did really well in the garden. So, if you do have the opportunity to save flower seeds, I would definitely do that because flowers are actually really expensive. And so, if you could kind of cut your budget in half when it comes to flowers, um, that I think you'd be really happy with the results.
And I think they're asking is like a similar process too to kind of save the seeds from the flower.
Yeah, it's the same process. So the flowers, for certain flowers, they will actually like start to create flowers, but others they'll just kind of die. So kind of knowing what is the pollination style for that particular flower and factor that into if you'll be able to save seeds from it or not.
And I've seen at a couple of the green markets around the city, like the bigger ones like Union Square, they're selling sunflower heads that are specifically for seeds. I mean, you could eat them too, but you could also plant them. But yeah, it's kind of similar where like the sunflower has to die off, and then that's when the seeds mature and you can scrape off the seeds. But it varies a little bit by flower, but it's similar.
Yeah.
How many seeds should you save from year to year?
I guess it would depend on how much you're growing. What I will say is that for the radishes, I only saved two of the plants, and all of those radish pods that you saw came from just two plants. So once you kind of see it growing out, and I think you'll be able to kind of determine if this is enough seeds or if you would need to, do a succession planting so that way you could get more of these particular seeds, and also factoring the size of your space, how many people you're growing for, et cetera, et cetera. So,
Yeah,
We
it's
also
hard to
might
say
grow.
based on
Yeah.
your space. And
yeah.
what I would recommend is just save more than you think you
Yeah.
need because not all of your seeds are going to germinate.
Mhm.
Also, like personally, I'm a beginner with seed keeping, so I probably won't do it perfectly the first few times. And a lot of it's just up to Mother Nature. You never know what's going to happen. Um, and a lot of plants too just might not have the like proper reproduction genetic material in them. So there's certain, especially if you're buying like store-bought seeds to start with and you want to seed save from those, just make sure you're not getting a hybrid version because hybrids, well, they're not meant to have to reproduce or have that genetic material. So it's kind of definitely the first few years that you do this, I would say leave a lot of room, like a big margin of error, because that's probably what's going to happen. It's an experiment.
Yeah, and then also, if you're saving more than what you need, then that means that you have more to trade for different stuff that you might want. And then I actually learned from a farmer that I know some techniques that he uses to make sure that seeds germinate. And so they basically just make like these compost balls, and you pop a seed in each little compost ball and plant that, and so that way the plant is drawing the nutrients from this little ball that you planted, and you have a higher germination rate.
Yes, someone's got a follow-up question. They're saying that they used to keep apple, peach, mango, and strawberry seeds after they like ate the fruit.
Mhm.
Somebody else saying oranges too, but nothing like after they planted these things, like nothing happened. So they're asking, what did they do wrong or need to do differently?
Mm. It's well, you never know with grocery store things. I was about to like pop out of my chair and bring over my lemon tree,
Please.
but that's probably not necessary. But I did plant a lemon seed from a grocery store lemon last April, and I had no idea if it was going to grow because it's a grocery store. I don't know where it was coming from. I didn't know what genetic material was in it. So when I was curious about seeing if they could germinate, I took like 5 seeds and I did that test where you keep it in a wet paper towel in a Tupperware. And I took the for those ones, I took the strongest seed and I did plant that one. With certain the ones you mentioned, like orange, lemon, and mango, I think you said, they have a very tough um, outer layer. And so there are some guides that I read online that suggest carefully like breaking apart that outer shell because it does make it harder. But instead of doing that, I soaked the seeds, which worked for me. But again, that's like with these, you never know what you're going to get exactly. And even with apples, it's really can be super random what you
Yeah.
get because apples from a tree don't have the same they don't have the identical genetic material as the tree that they're growing from.
Mhm.
So with those, a lot of the time, if you are taking, you say you buy a pink lady apple from market, and then you're like, this is the best pink lady apple I've ever had. I'm gonna take this seed and plant it and grow my own pink lady apple. And you wait 5, 10 years, you could just get a crab apple tree.
Yeah.
Um, so they can, yeah, so they're a surprise. So that's also why people recommend, growing few seeds to see which actually germinates. Certain plants you'll be better off maybe not even seed saving, like if you're doing apples, that's why people graft them onto a tree so that you can ensure the genetic material in your plant. So there's a lot of things that can happen.
Mm.
And if you just treat it as a big like surprise, that'll be more fun than just trying to control what nature is going to do.
The other thing too, I don't know if you planted these indoors or outdoors, but if you put it, I'd say if you're going to try it inside so that you can control the environment a little more
Mhm.
and make sure that like a squirrel or a bird doesn't come along and eat it before it had the chance to doing whatever it was going to do. So maybe try it inside too first, which is another reason to overplant things outside, especially in an urban area. What is the story around zucchini seeds? I've read that it's risky.
That I never heard that before. I know certain seeds like in the cucurbit family, you have to leave it on the vine and let it get kind of like moldy, like it looks inedible. Nobody wants it but you. And then that's kind of how you would know that the seeds are ready to be harvested. But I'm not sure of any like particular problems with zucchinis themselves.
Yeah, I've never seeds kept from zucchinis. If anyone on the workshop has and you know what to do, feel free to put it in the chat.
Yes, I'm doing a quick Google, and Hudson Valley Seed Co. is saying that you have to let the fruits get, yeah, you have to leave them on the plant well after you would want to eat them.
Okay. So
Right.
same with cucumbers.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Nobody wants it but you,
You leave like a
essentially.
mushy
Yeah.
yellow going
Nah.
bad.
They're like, how
That's
you
for your
keeping
harvest.
this?
Yeah.
And that's
That's what's different about all every plant you do is going to be a little different. Like for
Right.
tomatoes, you want to harvest them when they're at their peak. And when you really want to eat them, that's the best time to take the seeds from them as well. So it really varies.
And then you have to ferment zucchini seeds too. Um,
Okay.
yeah, so there's a bit of a process to it to actually like safely preserve them. So always good to check, specifically for the thing you're trying to do.
And then
Um,
that's so funny because someone just put in the chat that they accidentally grew squash from a store-bought acorn squash by throwing seeds into my compost bin. So like you could do all the research and then sometimes things will just sprout whether you want them to or not. Funny.
So those compost balls come in handy. Another thing that a lot of like indigenous farmers do is they'll actually like soak seeds in their mouths, and it's said that the saliva actually breaks down that hard coat from the seed. So if you don't feel like soaking seeds, you could just like put them in your mouth, I guess, if you wanted to.
Let's see. Okay, pepper seeds. This person loves shishitos, and they would love to save shishito pepper seeds.
Oh, okay. For the peppers, I know for sure you have to make sure that you wear gloves, especially for the hot peppers, because you don't want to burn yourself. And I think it's very similar to the tomatoes, in the fact that you have to pick it when it's at its prime. But as far as like the other parts of it, I didn't grow a lot of peppers this season, so I wasn't really planning on doing a lot of seed saving from it. But in that seed saving guide that we have it as a resource that we'll send to you tomorrow. It has like a whole list of crops and like the different seed saving methods that you would need for each individual one.
Can you collect seeds from squash or tomatoes you buy at the farmer's market? Yes, that's actually a very good place to save seeds from.
And it's worth asking. It's worth asking the farmer or the person working there, like the heirloom varieties, just to make sure you're getting your best chances.
Let's see. If somebody has harvested some lettuce seeds this year, is it too late to plant them again this season?
Right now, I mean, no, because
if they're dried.
If they're dry, then you could plant them now if you wanted to, because the lettuce is going to do really well because it's not too hot. And then even in the colder periods, you might get like 1 or 2 more harvests from it before it's done.
And let's see.
Can I answer the pawpaw question? Because I actually.
Oh yeah, please. Okay.
Someone asked if we have any pawpaw seeds at the teaching garden on Governor's Island, and the answer is maybe. Though we do have a couple of pawpaw trees out there, but you have to like hit it at the exact right moments because they need to be ripe and ready to harvest, and there's only like a day window for that. And then you could harvest the seeds. So I know they gave away seeds to someone who was like happened to be on a tour the same day that there was a ripe pawpaw. But you can go on the weekends and see, or email us, and we'll try to, if you're really desperate for pawpaws, we can try to email and figure out when they're ripe.
How do you save flower bulbs?
How do you save them?
Flower bulbs, you for that, they kind of just multiply on their own. And then you need to thin them out every couple of years when they start to get too crowded. And when you harvest them, you can just keep them in a dry, cool place and then plant them again. Or you can just plant them immediately after you separate them. Or usually you want to dry them out for like a few days at least, and then you can plant them somewhere else. But that's pretty different than seed keeping. But it's an easier process, honestly.
Yeah, because the bulbs themselves, like say you have like a bunch of like dry bulbs and you're like, oh, I don't know if this is worth anything. If you soak them in water for a little bit and then pull them apart and you plant them, they'll come back. So
do you do seed scarification, or like encouraging them to germinate for all the seeds that you save regardless of the crop and year? Or are there certain times you do that over others?
I think it depends on like what's going on with the plant. So for instance, with the cilantro, that actually seeded really quickly, and I was kind of picking the flowers off and doing all the right things, but the plant wanted to go to seed, and so that's what I let it do. So sometimes, depending on the weather, especially like with climate change, bolting and plants going to seed is actually a lot easier. And so I didn't really make the decision. The plants kind of made the decision, and I just kind of followed along.
I think they mean like do we soak our seeds or try to force them to germinate faster when we plant them?
Um,
Or do we just plant them?
I mean, if you wanted to, you could try the compost balls thing I was telling you guys about, because that might actually help with the germination, or even putting it in the paper towel and letting it germinate to see how viable the seed is. But usually, I just kind of plant my seeds regularly and let
Yeah,
them
it's
do.
not, yeah, it's not necessary for
No.
most things. It's just like an extra, and yeah, to soak them, or it's only if it's like a very tough outer shell for some reason you really feel the need to, but it's not necessary.
Yeah, or maybe you only have a limited amount of that seed because you got it from someone else. So in that case, you would want it to germinate. You would want to try to germinate as much of it as possible because you're hoping to get more seeds from it later. So just kind of depends.
And here's a good question. Should we wash the seeds like tomatoes before saving?
No,
Wet. No,
no,
just let
I
them
don't
dry
think,
it.
yeah, no, no, no. You want to, it's actually good to have like the gel in them and put that all on a paper towel and let it dry out that way. We have a resource, a guide on how to save tomato seeds that kind of lays out the whole process, and then you can choose to ferment them or not. You can do it either way. So we'll add that in the follow-up resources too. Um,
Yeah.
that's a good question.
Yeah.
And before we jump off because it's 5 o'clock, I'll just share what someone put in the Q&A in case attendees can't see it. Apparently, there's a good column today in the New York Times by Margaret Roach about saving and propagating wildflower seeds. So that might be something y'all might be interested in too.
Very timely. Um, all right. Well, thank you, Chantel and Laura, for presenting today. Thank you to all of you for tuning in. We are going to send you all of these resources tomorrow, so you'll have them in your inbox and you can look back. You can always email us at schoolgardens@grownyc.org if you have more specific questions. And we have another workshop coming up in 2 weeks on edible weeds. So if you're interested in learning more about edible weeds, we hope you will join us for that in 2 weeks. Otherwise, be safe, have a really nice night, and hopefully we'll see you when we talk about weeds next. All right. Happy seed saving, happy seed keeping. All right, bye, everyone.